Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to the Week 9 Stacks Show. Got a lot of missing quarterbacks this week. Got a lot of games with low totals. The highest total on the slate for the main slate this week looks like it's 46 points. That's the Dallas Philly game. And there are a few games on this slate that could go over their totals, which makes it an interesting slate. And I'm going to be giving you my first look here, and I'll dig into that right after this. And we're going to try to find a game of the week that is not being played in Philly. Hey, what's up, guys, and welcome to the Cheap Stack Show. I'm Simon Edwards at PumaCom with Heatseeker Sports, and I'm going to be taking a look at this Week 9 main slate here. I've been focusing most of my attention so far this week onto that Kansas City Miami game. So make sure to check out that show. I put out a showdown show earlier today. You can look at that show to get ideas for building your DraftKings showdown lineups for the Germany game. Make sure to check that out. You can still have time to enter those lineups. I put a lot of research into that game, so I'm a little bit behind on the main slate, which is why I'm doing this show so late. But I'm going to take a look at this main slate and see if we can find some value with some of these stacks and everything. But definitely subscribe to this YouTube channel. I'm always putting out showdown slates, doing showdown shows called Game Script, where I break down these island games and try to give you good DraftKings showdown picks and lineups. Do a lot with guests on that show too. So you're definitely going to want to subscribe to the channel to get those in the future. And make sure that you hit like on this video. Appreciate all the likes. Don't ask for any money or anything like that. I don't have any paid memberships or anything like that. I'm doing all this stuff for free. And all I ask in return is that you hit that like button and subscribe to the page. Definitely appreciate all that. And let's dig into it. Let's find out what we're looking at this Week 9 main slate. So the first game I see on here is Minnesota versus Atlanta. From a perspective of Minnesota, they lost Kirk Cousins last week, and Minnesota was making a little bit of a run like the last few weeks with Kirk Cousins, and it's a little bit disappointing to see them in this situation. I was kind of hoping that they would pull it off. There was a lot of naysayers about Minnesota saying that their last year's performance was pretty fluky, how they made it to the playoffs and everything. They had a lot of luck go their way last year, but they were still a good team. Kirk Cousins is a good quarterback. He's an underrated quarterback. You hate to see it with his Achilles getting torn, but now we're in a situation where Minnesota truly is in very rough shape. They're in a game against Atlanta with a 37-point total. Last I checked, and it's a 4.5-point favorites in Atlanta's favor. A game like this, you'd figure that Atlanta's going to be doing a ton of running in this game. Minnesota's been decent against the run, though. They've only allowed 15 points a game to running backs, 15 DraftKings points a game. When I do these numbers, by the way, I've taken out weeks 1 and 2. Now that we're far enough along in the season, I've taken out weeks 1 and 2. Those are weeks that tend to be more preseason-y with defenses and offenses and everything getting their bearings basically heading into the season. So weeks 1 and 2 are not included when I give these numbers out. But yeah, Atlanta, their run game is what makes that team. I don't like them for their passing game, and that is where Minnesota is the weakest. Minnesota is allowing 19.4 to wideouts, 19.4 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, and 23.8 points a game to the slot. I don't really see any matchups that I like too much that takes advantage of those. Drake London would be the only guy that I'd have interest in, but he has a bad DVOA matchup. It's one of the Minnesota corner who Drake London is going to be up against is a bad matchup. I don't really like that matchup for him. Mac Hollins has the better matchup on Minnesota's side or on Atlanta's side, but I don't like really anyone in the Atlanta passing game just based on what we've seen out of them this year and such a low total with 37 points. You got to figure maybe Bijan get some work in this game. Let's take a look at Bijan. Hasn't done too much. Yeah, he's another victim of the Arthur Smith situation, but I would not be surprised to see Bijan pop off in this game, and he's only 6,100. So I think Bijan is worth keeping in your player pool, despite the bad matchup and despite the fact that he hasn't done anything recently, and who knows what Arthur Smith is doing with him. Unfortunately, as long as Atlanta keeps doing decent or winning games, they're just going to keep doing this awful stuff with their offense and killing us in fantasy. So not really interested in this game in general. Next game on the slate, we got Seattle versus Baltimore. Let's see. Oh, I will say with that Minnesota game, the Minnesota side, like the slot receiver, has an interesting. Brandon Powell has an interesting matchup. We got Atlanta allowing 25 points, fantasy points a game to the slot receiver and 13 fantasy points a game to the tight end. Hawkinson might be interesting. I'm not really interested in Brandon Powell, but Hawkinson might be interesting. KJ Osborne runs a lot of routes from the slot. He's 41% of his routes are from the slot. So KJ Osborne or TJ Hawkinson might be interesting, but they're playing with like a scrubby quarterback. So just in general, I'm just not interested in that game. But if you wanted to put a couple guys on your radar, do some digging into KJ Osborne and TJ Hawkinson, who have the better matchups for Minnesota this week. Seattle versus Baltimore. This is an interesting game because we got two good teams facing off. Seattle had a pretty bad defense in the beginning of the year. They've kind of come around recently. They're still giving up a lot of points to the slot receiver, which is good for our guy. Nelson Aguilar is primarily playing the slot, but Zay Flowers plays a decent amount of his reps from the slot. He's 30% slot alignment reps, so routes run, but that or where he's aligned. He's aligned 30% from the slot. So Zay Flowers is kind of interesting in this game as far as matchups. From a pure Draftkings points allowed perspective, Seattle is only allowing 18 points a game to the running back position. They're only allowing 10 points a game to the wideouts, and they're only allowing 9.8 points a game to tight end. But we're not too worried about that when it comes to Baltimore's side, because we know that like Lamar and that offense can overcome all that stuff. So with a total of 42.5, that doesn't seem like a big total, but like on this slate, it's actually the third highest total. So that definitely makes Seattle and Baltimore interesting. As far as their pacing, they both have decent paces. So this could be an interesting game from an ownership perspective. Let's see. Lamar Jackson is again, he's one of the highest projected owned guys. He's at 12% this week. you know, just all that information taken into account. He's also 8,200. Uh, just given the matchup, Seattle only allowing 16 points a game, fantasy points a game to the quarterback position. Um, where are they playing? Are they playing? They're playing in Baltimore at least, so that makes them kind of interesting. Yeah, I think if I was gonna go in this game, let's see what Jackson's done lately. Last week, he put up a dud. We faded him last week, so that's good. Detroit is the game where he went off. He scored almost 38 points, Draftkings points. Before that, it was Tennessee with 18. And he had a stretch there early in the season where he scored 22, 32, and 29 points. I don't know what to expect out of him in this matchup. I would say Lamar Jackson will have a good game. I don't know if he's going to have a slate breaking game, and he's 8,200. So if the Seattle side can keep pace with the points that Baltimore is putting up, that would make them a little bit more interesting. But Baltimore's defense has been good. They're only allowing 12 fantasy points a game to the quarterback position, 11 fantasy points a game to the wideouts, 15 to slot. Those are all like tough numbers for Seattle, and they're playing in Baltimore. So, and then 11 fantasy points a game to tight end position. So there's no one that I really am interested in on the Seattle side. Geno, I think he's a little bit overrated. Geno can handle games with the easier matchups, but look at these fantasy outputs. Like, is this really a game that we want to invest in this week? 15 points versus Cleveland, 15 points versus Arizona, 15 points versus Cincy, 9 points versus the Giants, which should have been an easy matchup. 16 points against Carolina, like 26 points against Detroit, and 9 points versus the Rams. So Geno's been terrible this year. I'm not interested in Geno at all. What's his ownership? Let's see what his ownership is this week. Doesn't look like he's going to be highly owned. So at least, people are smarting up to him. But yeah, Geno's. I don't know if he's going to be able to put up offensive output that's going to make this game go much higher than over the total. And I don't see a lot of matchups that I like either. Maybe Zay Flowers, if you were going to go somewhere in this matchup. Zay Flowers has been coming alive recently. Last week, he had only 6.9 points, but before that, he had 11 and a half. He had 17 points. He had 12 points. He hasn't had enough points to justify a 5,700 salary. So maybe this game's a pass for me. I just don't see like any matchups that I really am interested in. Just looking at this on paper, except for that slot for the Baltimore side. Maybe Nelson Aguilar. What's Nelson Aguilar's price? 3,000 for Nelson Aguilar. What's he done recently? He's had a couple decent weeks in there that would justify taking a flyer on him, but generally, I just don't like too many people from this game. In fact, I might even like the Ravens defense at 3,800 against the Seahawks, who I think, like Geno's, overrated. They're in first place in the division because San Francisco went on a cooler. But Seattle, who have they played recently? They played Cleveland, and they lost to Cleveland. Or no, they beat Cleveland last week. They beat Arizona. They beat Cleveland with no Watson. They beat Arizona, who's like just generally a easier matchup. They lost to Cincy. They beat the Giants. They beat Carolina. They won all the games that they should win, and they've lost a few games in there too. They've had a relatively easy schedule apart from playing Detroit, who they beat. Detroit's their biggest win. It looks like Detroit's their biggest win. That came in week 2, but Cleveland was an okay win. But they had PJ Walker starting for him last week, so you know, not really interested in this game. I can't talk myself into it. So move on to the next game. We got the uh, Cleveland Browns versus the Arizona Cardinals. Now, this is a game that might be interesting because we got word that Deshaun Watson is in. The only problem with it is that we got this guy Tune, who I believe is starting for Arizona this week. Clayton Tune. He is a rookie that, I heard some good things about, like in the preseason. Um, Kind of remains to be seen if he can do anything. He didn't really get any work last week. He only had one pass attempt against Seattle in week 7, actually. Didn't really do anything, but he's starting his first career start against the Cleveland Browns. I mean, that's got defense written all over it. Browns defense a little bit expensive at 4,200 though. So maybe the running backs for the Cleveland side. As far as the total on this game, we're looking at 37.5 point total. 7.5 point favorites is Cleveland. Yeah, so Arizona's given up a boatload of points to the running back position. So that makes Jacoby Ford is coming back this week. Let's see. Ford or Jerome Ford. Jerome Ford, he's been hurt recently. Last week he only had 5 DraftKings points. Week before that he had 17. He had 11 before that. He's had some big games this year, and I would not be surprised if he had a decent game versus Arizona if they want to try to get him going again. It's been Kareem Hunt recently, kind of picking up the slack. Last week, Kareem Hunt had 13.7 points and a touchdown. Kareem Hunt's been on a little bit of a touchdown tear these last few weeks. He scored 4 touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. He's at 5,500 though, so the price is catching up to it, and he's only putting up like under 15 fantasy points a game in that stretch. So not enough upside there. It doesn't look like, but Jerome Ford's got a little bit more upside. He's only 5,300. Jerome, one of these running backs would be interesting. I think Jerome Ford is who I'd lean, where I'd lean on that. We got a situation too with Keontae Ingram at 4,300 versus that Browns D. Keontae obviously hasn't done anything this season, but we got Keontae Ingram. We got a rookie quarterback. Maybe they lean on the run a bit. Cleveland, as far as the matchup, they're allowing 20.6 DraftKings points a game. Cleveland's defense is allowing like a decent fantasy points to quarterbacks. They're allowing 18 points a game to quarterback position, which is pretty bad. I wouldn't expect that from Cleveland's D. So they're giving up DraftKings points. They're giving up 21 to the running back, 14 to wideouts, 18 to the slot. The only position they've been good against is the tight end position. Who've they played? Who's Cleveland been playing that they've done so many allowed so many points? Seattle last week. Indy had a ton of points against them. San Fran, they held San Francisco pretty good, and they beat San Francisco. Baltimore kind of killed them. Tennessee, they killed Tennessee. So they've had like a few tough games in there, but nothing that they should have being allowing like this many fantasy points against. So yeah, Arizona would be interesting if Dobbs was in there, but he's not. So I would probably be looking at the Cleveland running game, and then, the wideout, Amari Cooper. Maybe Deshaun Watson coming back if they want to get him back up to speed with passing the ball. I could see Cooper like having a decent game. Where are they playing? Are they playing at home or on the road? They're playing at home, so that's good for Cooper. Cooper might be interesting this week. I would keep Cooper in my player pool this week. Let's see what's his and his DVOA matchup looks good too. Peoples Jones they just traded as well, so he's got less competition in that wide receiver core. I can see Cooper having a decent game this week. Cedric Tillman, don't be surprised if they start working Cedric Tillman in either, because they traded Peoples Jones because they know they got Tillman here. And Tillman hasn't done anything this season. He's 3K. He's expected to be among the top 4 wideouts Sunday with David Bell ruled out. Yeah, keep Tillman on your radar, because the wideouts have a good matchup against Arizona. Watson is back this week, and they just traded Peoples Jones. They're going to want to get this guy integrated into their offense, provide a little spark. Don't be surprised if they make an effort to work Tillman in this week in a good matchup against Arizona in a game that they should have no problem winning. Maybe they want to experiment a little bit and get this rookie involved this week. He's only 3K on DraftKings, so that's an interesting play right there. Let's see. All right, Rams versus Green Bay. This is a game with another situation with a potential backup quarterback. It's looking like Stafford is questionable to maybe doubtful, like he's got a thumb injury. So looking like there's likely, I think the last blurb I saw was saying that the plan is to play the backup this week. The backup quarterback is Ripien, this guy Ripien. And he has not done much of anything this year. That is unfortunate for these wonderful weapons that Los Angeles has in Cooper Kupp and Puka Nacua. We hate to see that. Rams playing Green Bay should be a relatively decent matchup for the Rams running game. In this one, Green Bay's given up a bunch of points to the running back. But Kyron Williams is on IR. God, we're looking at Darrell Henderson as the running back here. He's at 5,100 too. He's not cheap, and he's only had 11.5 points versus Dallas and 13.6 points against Pittsburgh. What's Royce Freeman done? Freeman got 10 points last week. Got nine attempts. And 12 attempts the week before that. Henderson has had 12 attempts and 18 attempts. So Henderson looks like the lead guy here, but like we've seen Los Angeles bail on Henderson in the past. So maybe I'm not really interested in the Green Bay side of things. I mean, on the Los Angeles side of things here. Green Bay's also been good against wideouts. We only got a 39.5 point total in this game. Three-point spread, which is surprising considering. Let me double check and see what the most recent line is, because that might be before Stafford was announced out. Let me just check that and see what the updated line would be for this game. Let's see. Rams versus the Packers. We're looking at a 3.5 point spread now, with Green Bay being 3.5 point favorites. Yeah, this game, probably not too interested there. Jordan Love has not been good this year. He got exposed early, but the Rams are giving up 21 and a half DraftKings points to the quarterback position. The Rams are good against the running back position, only giving up 16 points there. Wideouts are getting 17 and a half. Tight ends are getting 17 points against the Rams. I mean, this could be an interesting week for Christian Watson. I keep going back to Christian Watson, but he keeps getting these good matchups. He's only 4,900 now. Christian Watson is only 4,900 at this point. Last week he had 8 targets. He only put up 6 fantasy points. Jordan Love sucks. I mean, he did that against Minnesota. Jordan Love just sucks. Like 5 points in week 5 targets in week 7, 7 targets in week 5. All these targets, he's had 3 receptions, 3 receptions, 3 receptions those past 3 weeks. He hasn't he's put up 6 fantasy points, 6 fantasy points, 12 fantasy points and 10 fantasy points. I heard a lot of talk in the beginning of the season from like the Green Bay local local podcasts and stuff, talking about how they were glad to get rid of Aaron Rodgers and the drama and stuff. But look at what you got in return. Like Jordan Love is just awful. Look at this. He 15 and a half DraftKings points last week, 16 points the week before that, 8 points the week before that. He's putting up like middling numbers. So he himself, is sustaining that through his rushing numbers. 37 rushing yards, 21 rushing yards, 34 rushing yards in the past 3 weeks. But Jordan Love is just like he's not the answer in Green Bay, and it is affecting poor Christian Watson negatively. What's Romeo Doubs been doing? 12 points last week, 11 points the week before that. He had a couple big weeks in the beginning of the season before Christian Watson came back. But, if you think that Watson can overcome this stuff, maybe they make an effort to get Watson going because they're going to need him if they're going to make any type of a run. I would have interest in Christian Watson, maybe Romeo Doubs, given that the matchup is on paper pretty favorable. So, take that for what it's worth. But in general, just not a very interesting game there. Good thing about this slate is it's easy to cross off these games. I know that Baltimore-Seattle game is going to be, popular this week, and I can understand why. Definitely understand why. But when you look at the on-paper matchup, like it really doesn't pop off to me. Like you really have to, just look at what we know about those teams, and we know their offensive output ability. But Geno, I just think he's overrated. Kenneth Walker's matchup isn't too bad. 22 points a game is what Baltimore's given up on the ground. But yeah, I just don't like that game. So yeah, not a whole lot of good games this week. Tampa Bay versus Houston. Here's another game that doesn't really look interesting, but they got a 3-point spread with 40-point total, and Houston are the favorites in this game. Houston has a favorable quarterback matchup, and they got a favorable slot receiver matchup. So Robert Woods is out this week. Tank Dell might be interesting this week. Let's see. Tank Dell should be back this week. Let's see. Last week, Tank Dell had 6 points. He had 8 points the week before that. Now, Tank Dell, he started his decline, I think, kind of coincided with. First of all, he was hurt. He missed a couple games. I don't know if they had a bye mixed in there too, but he missed 6 and 7, and then he came back last week. He only scored 6 DraftKings points, but I think that week 4 and 5 or one of those weeks, Noah Brown came back, and Tank Dell went off because Noah Brown had got hurt, and Tank Dell was taking his spot. But Noah Brown, when did he come back? He came back in week 6. So he was competing with targets with Noah Brown in week 8. Robert Woods is out this week, though. That's the point I'm trying to bring up. Robert Woods is out, so I think that Tank Dell will play a bigger role this week, and that is going to make him interesting. I know he was running a decent amount of his routes from the slot before. Let me see if I can get a good good look at what he is doing from the slot this week. Let's see. Going to go down to Houston, check out their matchups here. Let's see. Look at the individual matchups. Tank Dell, he's only at 29% now from the slot. That's probably just the way that they've been shuffling things around. He does most of his routes 36% from the left side, 35% from the right side, 29% from the slot. None of those are too interesting. The wideouts, are putting up 12 points a game against Tampa Bay, and I think a lot of that was because Carlton was out for a couple games. So they're better. They're better than that might lead on. Cade Otton has the best matchup, I think, apart from that slot receiver of Houston. Houston's slot receiver, who's the guy running the most routes from the slot? That's going to be Noah Brown. So Noah Brown might be interesting this week. Keep Noah Brown in your player pool. I know he hasn't done anything much this season, but Noah Brown has been interesting in the past. I think he played with the Cowboys. I remember with the Cowboys, he had a few flashes. So Noah Brown might be interesting this week. Don't be surprised if he does something, and his salary is $3,100. So if you're looking for a cheap guy, keep Noah Brown in your player pool, because the Bucks are giving up points to the slot receiver. They're giving up a lot of points to the slot, 29 points to the slot. And that's where Noah Brown is running 53% of his routes. He's only been back for a couple games, though. But he's been running a decent amount from the slot. I would imagine with Robert Woods out, that is where Noah Brown is going to be running the majority of his routes. Tank Dell, he might run a decent amount from the slot too. So maybe keep him in your player pool. Otherwise, we're looking at a 40-point total in this one. It's another game we can kind of scratch off. I think there's more interesting games on this slate, but this is good. I mean, this is good that we're narrowing down this player pool. Washington versus New England. This is a game I'm a little bit more interested in, just because on paper, at least, we're seeing like the first matchup that looks pretty good, with both defenses giving up DraftKings points. We've seen Sam Howell, pull out some of these games. He's going to have a tough go against a Belichick defense, because Belichick's good at scheming against those like crappy quarterbacks. And he's got Sam Howell this week. Hit or miss with Sam Howell. He's had some good weeks this week. Sometimes he looks great, like he did last week against Philly. He put up a really good numbers against Philly, almost 400 yards, 4 touchdowns in a competitive game. He almost pulled off the upset. And then he had 18 versus Atlanta, 29 points versus Chicago. He's had some big games in there. So I don't hate Sam Howell, especially with New England they're only giving up 17 points a game to the quarterback position. But if Sam Howell is able to kind of pull off a week like he did last week, that would make him interesting. Wideouts are the targets that we want on Washington's side. That's where New England is giving up 22.5 points, DraftKings points a game. So we got Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin. Dotson has the better matchup. Well, they both line up from the left side a pretty equal amount. So both of them have good matchups. You can take your pick between Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin this week. But we saw Dotson finally show signs of life last week. He scored 27, almost 28 DraftKings points. Been waiting on that breakout for a while. Terry McLaurin has been more consistent, but Terry McLaurin has also, he hasn't had a huge game since week 4 against Philly. Last week, he put up 17 DraftKings points. Week before that, 15 and 14 the week before that. He's at 5,600. So McLaurin is interesting this week, especially with that matchup. But he might be the guy that they decide to try to shut down on the New England side. So don't be surprised if Jahan Dotson has a good follow-up game this week. I hear a lot of people talking up Douglas on the Patriots side. It makes sense with Douglas. Kendrick Bourne is on IR. Douglas is only 4K. I went over like cheaper guys that I also like a little bit more in the past games. Juju Smith-Schuster is only 3,100. Let's see, Juju Smith-Schuster. Yeah, wideouts are the ones who have the better matchups against New England. And Douglas has run 86% of his routes from the slot. What did Douglas do last week? Why are everybody excited about him? I mean, he hasn't done anything, so I don't understand. Like the love for Demario Douglas this week, other than Kendrick Bourne is out and people think that he's going to jump into that spot. I could see him like doing it like as chalk, just to burn everybody who's fading him. But I wouldn't be too excited about putting Demario Douglas in my lineups this week. I like more the Terry McLaurin aspect of this matchup. I could see this game shooting out a little bit. New England, Hunter Henry has a good matchup this week too. Washington is giving up 15 points a game, 14.5 points a game to the tight end position. Let's look at what Hunter Henry has done recently. I don't think he's done much. No, he hasn't done anything. Like weeks 1 and 2, he had like good outputs, but he hasn't done anything since. And his salary is still up there at 3,600 for the tight end. So that's unfortunate. But I don't hate the Mac Jones stacks this week. I don't hate Mac Jones with Washington giving up 26 points a game to the quarterback position. We've seen that rookie wideout. We've targeted him in the past, or the rookie cornerback for Washington, Emmanuel Forbes. Poor guy deleted his Twitter account after getting burned by A.J. Brown earlier this year. And the guy just keeps getting like put out there to be embarrassed by these wide receivers. But New England, the question would be, who on New England is going to take advantage of a matchup like that? People seem to be leaning on Douglas. It's a crapshoot between who would be like Douglas and Smith-Schuster, though. Honestly, they got Rager. They haven't really used Rager yet. Yeah. So I can see the hype a little bit for Douglas this week, but maybe they just turn to the running game. They haven't used the running game much. How is Washington against the run? 21 points a game to running backs. If I was going to stack this game, I would probably put Mac Jones with Hunter Henry and, maybe Juju Smith-Schuster, who also hasn't done anything. Like these wide receivers on New England side just suck. Like this, it's hard to get excited about it. What's up with Tyquan Thornton? Is he even? Where's he at? He's questionable. Questionable with a foot injury. I don't hate Tyquan Thornton. He hasn't done anything this year either. He hasn't gotten any targets or anything. But he's a guy that we know that New England was high on at least last season, and he seems like he's been hurt a lot this season. I would not be surprised if Tyquan Thornton comes out of nowhere and just kind of steals that thunder from Douglas. But I kind of like the Washington side on this better. The more I talk about it, because we know where Washington is going at least, and you can run it back with Hunter Henry or something like that if you wanted to. Running backs, Stevenson has been a disappointment this year. He's had a couple weeks over double-digit points. I wouldn't be surprised to see Stevenson just come in and have a game this week against Washington. Are they playing at home? Stevenson, they're playing at New England, and we're looking at 3.5 point favorites. At least it was earlier in the week. What are they now? Let's see. New England is 2.5 point favorites now. So that line is tightened up. Stevenson, what has Elliott been doing? Taking the work away from him. Elliott got 7 attempts last week, 0 targets, 11 attempts, and 7 attempts. Those are his last 3 weeks. Stevenson's last 3 weeks are 10 attempts, 9 attempts, and 10 attempts. They lost to Miami by 2 touchdowns. They beat Buffalo by 4 points, and then they lost to Las Vegas somehow. So that explains a little bit why maybe Stevenson hasn't been getting much use, but I wouldn't be surprised to see Stevenson finally get some usage this week if they can fend off Washington at home. But this is another one of those weird games. I just don't like this slate this week. It's a bunch of weird games, and nothing really. The Sam Howell, stack side running it back with maybe Stevenson and Hunter Henry or something, or Hunter Henry. I wouldn't put too much stock in that game, but those are some interesting plays on that game. Let's move on to the next one. Let's see. Get rid of that previous game. Chicago versus New Orleans. This game's a little bit more interesting. We still got Badgett, poor guy, out there as the quarterback again. Last week, scored 13 fantasy points, had 232 passing yards against the Chargers. Chargers have a horrible defense, and he got intercepted twice by them. Had some rushing attempts for -1 yard. Nothing really to write home about Badgett, but how's his matchup this week against New Orleans? New Orleans has a pretty tough defense. They are, pretty tough defense to play against. Slot receivers are the only ones who are really having any type of success against New Orleans, and they're only having middling success. 22 fantasy points a game. On the New Orleans side, though, like they kind of can pick their way to attack Chicago here. We're looking at 20 points a game is what Chicago's given up to the quarterback. They're giving up 25 points a game to the running back, 13 points a game to wideouts, 24 points a game to slot, and 14.5 to tight ends. All those are among the top in the league, or I should say most in the league as far as giving up points. So New Orleans has a good matchup. Derek Carr, maybe his injury, he's getting better after his injury because he's shown sign of life recently. Derek Carr last 3 weeks, he scored 20. Oh my, wow. Like Derek Carr's hit 20 plus points the last 3 weeks. Last time we saw him, or I talked about him, was against Jacksonville, I believe. Primetime game, and Carr looked awful in that game. Somehow scored over 21 DraftKings points. Last week they beat Indy though. So Derek Carr's showing signs of life. He started off the year hurt, and that was reflected in his numbers. But he's been better these past few weeks, and he's got a get right matchup this week too, where they can choose to attack any way that they want, which basically puts Alvin Kamara in play because he will be used no matter what the game script is. 27 points last week, 29 the week before. He's just been on a tear. What's Alvin Kamara's ownership? Wonder if he's highest owned on the slate this week. No, Bijan is the highest owned. Alvin Kamara is number 2 though, so that doesn't surprise me. Alvin Kamara, second highest owned guy on the slate. Matchup definitely supports that. Who else has a good matchup? The the slot receiver. Ooh, we get Shaheed week again. Had him last week. We talked him up last week, and Shaheed went off. Scored like 27 DraftKings points last. I always love when it's a Shaheed week. And where is Shaheed in ownership this week too? Somehow Shaheed is not the highest owned guy. Rashid Shaheed how is he sub 2% owned? I don't get like how people don't like recognize it was Shaheed. Let's see, what's Shaheed's output? Last week he got us 27 DraftKings points. He's had outputs of 18 DraftKings points and 20 DraftKings points. In addition to that, he is running a majority of his routes, 47% of his routes from the slot. And that is where Chicago is giving up 24 points a game to slot receivers. Derek Carr clearly likes Shaheed and trusts him. He hasn't he didn't get many targets last week. He only got 3 targets last week, but he used them for 153 yards on 3 targets. So Shaheed is definitely in play again. He's only 4,500. He's still cheap. Let other people put Douglas in their lineups. I'm going to be probably putting Shaheed in my lineups. That's a good pivot right there. Yeah, Shaheed has got a good matchup. New Orleans, if you wanted to, I don't even hate stacking him with Carr. With Carr's kind of expensive. He's 5,700. Let's look at him compared to the rest of these quarterbacks here. Let's see. Carr he's down there. He's right with Hal. Daniel Jones is back this week. Who else is down there? Deshaun Watson is cheaper than him. Bryce Young. We're going to talk about that game here in a second. Heineke. You know what? I forgot that Heineke was the quarterback now instead of what's his face, Ritter. That makes him interesting. We've seen Heineke in the past. He good running the ball. We'll find out this week if if like the bad play calling with lack of use of those offensive weapons on Atlanta is more of a Ritter thing or a Arthur Smith thing, because Heineke's starting the game this week, and he's got a good matchup for the passing game. Drake London, we were talking about it earlier. Drake London has like a good opportunity this week, at least with Heineke. We'll see what happens there. But and just went on a tangent there. Mac Jones is 4,900. Kind of puts things into perspective. I saw a tweet. Someone put out a tweet earlier today talking about Mac Jones compared to Trevor Lawrence, and their numbers are almost identical. The numbers are pretty much identical between Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence. So funny stuff there. The way that Mac Jones is just dragged compared to Trevor Lawrence. Trevor Lawrence, the Golden Boy versus Mac Jones, the scrub, and their numbers are pretty close to the same. You got to give Trevor Lawrence a little bit of slack though with that rookie year. Who else do we have? Rippin against Green Bay is 4,700. He's got the weapons. Obviously, they just don't have that very good matchup. Yeah, that's about it for like the interesting guys. Let's look at this next game. Indy versus Carolina. Let's see. Is this finally a game we can stack? This is a 44.5 point total, 2.5 point spread. Let's see. That was earlier in the week. Let me see what they're at right now. Indy versus Carolina is a 43.5 point total with a 2.5 point spread. I like this game in general just because Gardner Minshew has been awesome this year, and I really like the coach of Indy, former Eagles offensive coordinator. Him and Minshew were together in Philly. Brings Minshew over. Anthony Richardson goes down. Minshew has his opportunity to start. He's only 5,200. And last week he had a tough matchup against New Orleans, but he made it a game, 27 points. Cleveland had an awesome game, 38 points against a tough defense. Almost pulled that one out. 305 passing yards that game. Week before that, 329 passing yards. Didn't throw many touchdowns though, so he only scored 16 fantasy points. But we've seen him run the ball too. He scored 2 rushing touchdowns against Cleveland. So, given the matchup, I think Minshew is a guy that can do some work. He's got Carolina this week. Carolina's given up 18 points a game to quarterback. And on the other side, Bryce Young gets an Indy defense that's given up about the same amount of points to the quarterback position. So we got sloppy shootout here, guys. Sloppy shootout between Carolina Panthers and the Indianapolis Colts. We saw what's his face, the coach give up play calling duties last week. Frank Reich gave up play calling duties last week. Didn't do too much. Bryce Young has not been great this year, but last week was a low-scoring game. It was 15-13. Miami, he put up only 13 points against Miami. But Detroit, he put up 20 points against Detroit. I probably wouldn't take the Bryce Young side of this, but I do like the Minshew side of this. And we just hope that Bryce Young can put up points against. Let's just cut to the chase here. Minshew, who's got the matchup on the Indy side. Jonathan Taylor has a really good matchup. Carolina's giving up 34 points a game to the running back. So maybe we put Minshew in there with Taylor. Let's see. We put Minshew in there with Taylor. And let's see, who's got the best matchup from a wideout perspective? The wideouts have the best matchup. Josh Downs is questionable, but he's a slot receiver. Alec Pierce. Looks like Alec Pierce lines up from the spot where, from a DVOA perspective on the left side of the field, that is where Carolina's defense is the weakest. So if we wanted to put in Alec Pierce, he looked like he did something last week. He had he looked like he was doing a lot more than 7 points worth of work. He had 5 targets for 3 receptions and 41 yards. The week before that, 53 yards. Week before that, 25. I really want to know what Josh Downs' status is this week, though. Josh Downs has been on a little bit of a tear with Minshew. 14 points, 26 points, 13 points, 15 points. Look at that from Josh Downs. He's definitely one of Minshew's favorite targets. 9 targets, 6 targets, 8 targets, 6 targets. Josh Downs, hopefully he plays tomorrow, is on pace to play. And he is 5,200. His price is coming up there a little bit. Michael Pittman, 6,600. What's Pittman done lately? 13 targets last week, 5 targets, 14 targets. So he's getting a ton of targets too. And he's getting some output. 18 fantasy points, 16 fantasy points, 22 fantasy points. This might be a Gardner Minshew double stack situation. If we took out Taylor and we wanted to put in Pittman and Downs, let's see, and then maybe run it back with Thielen's gotten expensive, and the Indy's pretty good against the slot anyways. Thielen is at 7,500 now. God. He's earned it. A bunch of 30-point performances in there. But it's hard to pull the trigger on Thielen at that price. What did Mingo do recently? Mingo had 5 targets last week, 62 yards, didn't score a touchdown, but Mingo's been getting integrated in there a little bit. I just don't know enough about what the coaches are saying about Mingo right now, but Mingo would be interesting if his had a decent amount of that snap share. Thielen, though, obviously is the guy in Carolina. So if we plugged in Thielen, that's probably too many of these guys, because I want to put in. This is actually a game of the week that I think is actually like a good, a solid, legit matchup. Division rivals. Look at a 46-point total. We do have Dallas's defense, which is really good, but Philly's defense is really bad. And Philly's not going to get blown out by Dallas. It's a 3-point spread. So, I think the offense of Philly is strong enough to overcome the defense of Dallas. We've seen it in the past. But Dallas has given up 21 points a game to wideouts. And Philly's given up 21 points a game to wideouts and 26 points to slot receivers. So it makes me like the Dak side a little bit more than the Hurts side. But if I was going to stack this game, let me clear this out. We know, you know what? Like, I'm not a huge fan of Dak, but like it looks like Goddard has the best matchup. So that if we put Goddard in there, Uh, we got Dallas giving up 13 points a game to tight ends, which is a lot among like the top 10 most in the league. That puts Goddard at he scored 19 fantasy points 2 weeks ago, 29 fantasy points a few weeks ago too. I've been pretty good at calling Goddard games, and I feel like this is a Goddard game this week. So maybe a Minshew double stack is not necessary. Maybe we take out Downs because we just don't know what his health is, and we put in CeeDee Lamb instead because Philly's defense is the slot, and that's a perfect matchup for CeeDee Lamb. So if we put Lamb in there, leaves us with 4,400 per guy. Let's pick a defense here. Rams D. I like the Rams D against Green Bay, honestly. So let's put in the Rams D there. That's 2,600. That's pretty cheap. What other Ds do we have? Just so I don't jump the gun on that one. Packers D, like on the other side, is only $200 more. That might be actually the better way to go because like the Rams are starting that rookie quarterback, but like that would mean that the Rams defense is just going to be more aggressive against Green Bay because they're going to feel like they have to win it. So I kind of like that Rams side there, even though they're playing on the road. Kamara, I like Kamara. Leaves us 3,500. Gonna have to get rid of Mr. Thielen here. Let's see, Minshew to maybe put Downs back in there. Get Downs back in there, and let's give let's give him Taylor. Stack Minshew with Taylor and Pittman. That leaves us with 4K per guy. We got 2 spots left, one for wide out. Get a guy Shaheed in there. 3,600 is what we're left with for the flex position. Let's see what we can do with that. We got there's that Hunter Henry. He's at 3,600, but I don't know if I want to go double tight end. Michael Gallup, I don't hate that. Gives us another one of those Dallas guys at 3,600. Let's see. Look at Michael Gallup too. They've been a couple weeks ago. They made actively trying to get him back in the game. They blew out the Rams last week, so they really had no need for him. But they've actively been trying to get Gallup back in, and he's got a good matchup against Philly. So I don't hate that double stack of Dallas guys with using, maybe this cheaper, stack on the Indy game. Let's see if we can find a Carolina guy though that might, be a good run back, a good cheap run back there. Mingo is 3,400. What's Chark? 3,700. We're like $100 short, so we can dump the Rams and we could dump the Rams and go to like the Giants. Giants defense has actually been playing pretty well recently, and they just lost Tyrod Taylor, so the defense is going to step up. Last 2 weeks, 12 points, 14 points. They've been playing well. Vegas just fired their entire coaching staff. So we put in the Giants. That gives us 3,900 to play with. That puts us in, that gives us Chark if we want him. So Chark, what has he done lately for us? Nothing the last 2 weeks. He had 13 points week 5. 18.6 points. That was with Andy Dalton, I believe. But he's shown his upside. It's just a matter of Bryce Young being able to use him. But he is questionable, so I'm not really sure. It's an elbow injury, so at least it's not his legs. 2 limited practices. Yeah, he should be available. So DJ Chark would be a run back option there to complete this lineup and give us a good little correlation there. But yeah, I don't hate going in that direction. Taking a look at the Giants Vegas game, really, I think the main thing that I like there is that Giants D. Let's see. Giants, that game in itself, another low total game, 37.5 points. Nothing really, stands out about that one, honestly. Let's see. It's a 1.5 point spread, 37.5 points. Playing in Vegas, 2 horrible teams with a spread that close. It could be a sloppy shootout situation. Daniel Jones is back this week on top of it. But Vegas's defense, they're better than they look. They got Max Crosby. Barkley is interesting in that game. Jacobs is interesting in that game. Devontae is interesting in that game. They're playing with that rookie quarterback, though. Aiden O'Connell is taking over. Look at that mustache. 13 points a game, or 13 points versus the Chargers and 6 points versus Chicago. So Aiden O'Connell hasn't done much, but he's had a few games under his belt now. So we'll see what he can do. Could go either way with Vegas. It could go one of those situations where the team is amped up. They just got rid of a crappy coach. Now they have an opportunity to prove to everybody that it was the coaches that made them suck. Maybe they can start loosening up a little bit on that offense. They don't have the complicated scheme anymore. It puts them in a situation to do well. And it's a game that has, like a sloppy shootout potential. The only problem is the Giants side and them living up to their side of the bargain. Giants defense has been playing well. So he's going up against a rookie quarterback. I like Barkley kind of in this game. And I like Jacobs, I think. I think you can go either one of those guys if you're looking for a higher priced running back, but the total is only 37.5 points. And Adams, Adams is always going to be interesting. Let's look at Adams. Adams, maybe he'll benefit the most from getting rid of this coach. 8 points, 4 points, 12 points, 2 points. I mean, just awful. Just horrible. 7 targets, 1 reception last week. Just Jimmy G is just awful. He just sucks. Killed us on that showdown slate too. Like just killed us because we had the Jacobs part right. I had the Raiders D part right, and Jimmy G just freaking sucked. It just awful. Like it was just watching him play against Detroit. defense was putting them in position to do well, and Jimmy G just like blowing it every possession, and it was just so painful to watch. He couldn't hit any of his receivers against that Detroit defense. Had the perfect setup, and he just blew it. And just like having that money invested on the Raiders side, and seeing the defense live up to their side of the bargain, and then just Jimmy G just ruining the whole thing was just like brutal last week. But yeah, good to see him benched. Good to see Aiden O'Connell get a chance, and hopefully that does good things for Devontae Adams. But otherwise, I'm not interested in that game. Dallas versus Philly. This is the game of the week. We finally get a game of the week that's the actual game of the week. Apart from maybe that Indy Carolina game, but I just don't like the Bryce Young side of that as much. So that one's tough to get behind. But this one, Prescott has actually done well. He kind of broke out of his little slump there. 32 points against the Rams. Solid performance. He had 25 points against the Chargers, another solid performance. So Dak Prescott, kind of coming alive here for us, which is a good thing. On the other side, we got Jalen Hurts. Jalen Hurts has been solid this year. Philly's gotten their stuff together too. Seems like they're clicking now. They lost that game to the Jets. I think that was a wake-up call for them. Then they put up 31 points against Miami. They got that 25 fantasy points for Hurts. Put up 38 points against Washington. Their defense is still a liability. They allowed 31 points to be scored by Washington. That put Jalen Hurts at 31, fantasy points. This is another week where they have an offense. They're playing against an offense that could put up points. So I expect this game to be a shootout. If we wanted to go a different direction and get rid of Minshew and Jonathan Taylor, maybe even Pittman too. Let's say we want to go Dak to put him up with Lamb there. What is Hurts? Hurts is 8K. Yeah, Dak is only 6.5, and Hurts is. Let's give him Gallup too. Gallup in there too, because Philly's good against the run, but they are not good. Hang on a second. Google just logged me out for some reason. They're not good against wideouts, though. So that is what has been interesting in these matchups against Philly. Philly is, just elite against the run, actually. Tight end. Philly's good against the tight end, too. I like running it back with Goddard, like I was talking about earlier. Slot and Gallup and Lamb have the best matchups there. Let's find a running back that we can start here. After going through that slate, let's look at these running backs. I don't hate DeAndre Swift. I don't think he has the best matchup. 22.8 points. Jonathan Taylor, talked about him earlier. Let's put him back in. Let's see. That gives us 5,600 for this last spot, for this flex position. Leaves us with a lot of good options. McLaurin, he's in there. Jerome Ford, we talked about him. Bijan Robinson. Oh, that's Brian Robinson. Never mind. Josh Downs, Dubs. Just options. We have plenty of options if we go a route like this, and we get a decent amount of the stack in here. So, I kind of like that. I like that direction. It's not going to be hard to stack that game this week if you take the Dak side of it. If we wanted to put in Hurts instead, that leaves us with 4,100 for that flex. So I wouldn't hate using one of each side on that. That puts us. We got Pitts. We got some of these cheaper guys here. Man, you have to scroll down to find anyone worth a damn. But we're in that 4K running back territory. Ferguson, you could put him in there, but I don't think he has a great matchup against Philly. No, he's got a bad matchup against Philly. Elijah Moore talked about the wideout situation in Cleveland. Elijah Moore would be interesting. Hunter Henry. So you got some options. You got a decent amount of options if you want to stack this game. You could do it the Hurts way, or you could do it the Dak way. From an ownership perspective, let me take a look at ownership real quick. Hurts is going to be the highest owned guy. He's at 16%. Dak is lesser owned at 10%. I like Dak probably better in this matchup. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense why Hurts is so much higher. Other than his pedigree. But yeah, I kind of like Dak better. He's cheaper. He gives us more options. And from a fantasy output perspective, the upside of Dak, 32 points versus Hurts. Dak's upside, he's scored more. He's had a game with higher fantasy points than any of Hurts's games so far. So kind of gives you an idea. Like we talked about Hurts like a few times on this show about how like his tush push touchdowns have helped him out a lot this year, and his passing hasn't really been as good as last season, apart from like feeding AJ Brown. So that makes Prescott interesting at the ownership discount. So yeah, good slate this week. Gave you some games to maybe focus in on, and some potential guys out there. Shaheed, our guy Shaheed, again, 4,500, 2% owned. Gotta love that. So good luck, everybody. Make sure to hit like on the video, hit subscribe on the YouTube channel, and make sure to check out that Germany game. Did a game script of that earlier, where I broke that down. You still have time to enter those contests, so get those entries in, and we'll see you for Sunday Night Football.